long ago, in the verdant kingdom of Eldoria, where golden fields met silver rivers, and the mountains whispered old secrets to the stars, there lived a prince named Darien. He was the only child of King Alaric and Queen Seraphina, beloved by the people not only for his royal birth but for the kindness that blossomed in his every word and deed. While other noble sons trained with sword and spear, Darien spent his youth walking the villages of Eldoria, listening to the needs of the people. He studied the ways of the healers, sat with farmers to learn the rhythms of their harvests, and shared his meals with orphans under the old stone bridge in the town of Lindell. Darien's generosity became legendary. When a cruel winter struck and the kingdom's granaries barely fed the royal court, Darien opened the palace stores to the people, feeding thousands while he lived simply in the servants' quarters. His father, though stern and wary of such acts, could not scold a son so beloved by the land. One day, the king would often mutter, "He will give away the whole castle and sleep under a tree." Yet far from weakening the kingdom, Darien's kindness wove a bond between ruler and realm that no army could break. Still, despite his noble heart and wise mind, Darien had one sorrow. He had yet to find someone who could see him not as a prince, but as a man, a companion to walk beside him in love and purpose. Many noblewomen came, adorned in silks and perfumes, reciting poems they'd memorized to charm a throne. But Darien smiled kindly and sent them away. He did not seek a crown beside his own. He sought a soul that could match his. One day, news reached the court of a village deep in the eastern glades where strange winds had torn through the land, destroying crops and cottages. Without hesitation, Darien rode out with a caravan of supplies. When he arrived, the village of Eloan was battered and broken, its people living in fear of the next windstorm. But amid the destruction, he found something, or rather, someone, unexpected. A young woman stood in the center of the village square, arms outstretched, facing the wild wind that blew like a beast across the fields. Her name was Liara. She was no noblewoman, no heiress, but a weaver of both cloth and stories. It was she who had kept the villagers calm, tending wounds, rebuilding homes with her own two hands, and spinning old songs to keep hope alive. Intrigued, Darien approached her. "You do not fear the wind," he said. She turned, her eyes bright and unafraid. "Fear steals more than the storm does. I'd rather meet it head-on." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition. Over the weeks that followed, Darien stayed in Eloan. He helped rebuild, working beside Liara. They talked by firelight about the old tales of the kingdom, of dreams and duties, of love and leadership. Liara challenged him, questioned him, and laughed with him, not because he was a prince, but because he was simply Darien. She saw past his titles and into his heart. And he saw in her a strength that needed no crown, a kindness born not of wealth, but of will. When the village had healed, and the strange winds had calmed, thanks in part to Liara's clever windbreaks of willow and stone, Darien did not ride home alone. He asked Liara to return to the capital with him, not as a guest but as his equal. "I have spent my life giving to my people," he said. "But I would give it all, 10 times over, if it meant walking beside you." She smiled. "Then walk we shall." Their wedding was unlike any the realm had seen. No parade of nobles, no lavish feast. Instead, it was held in the great gardens of Eldoria, open to all. Farmers, fishmongers, scholars, and street musicians stood alongside dukes and diplomats. Liara wore a dress of her own weaving, embroidered with scenes from the villages she loved. When the king saw how the people cheered not just for Darien, but for his bride, when he saw how Liara listened and led with grace, he understood that his son had chosen not just well, but wisely. Together, Darien and Liara ruled not from a throne above the people, but among them. They founded schools and hospitals, reformed the tax system to be fair, and created programs for the poor and the elderly. Liara even established a guild of storytellers and weavers, ensuring that the voices of the people would always be heard and remembered. Their love was not the kind sung of by bards with rhymes and riddles, but a quiet, steadfast flame that burned in every corner of the kingdom. Years later, when Darien and Liara grew old, children would gather at their feet to hear the tale of how a generous prince found not just a wife, but a partner, a warrior of compassion, and a queen of the people. And when the prince finally laid down his crown, it was not placed in a tomb, but passed to their daughter, Elira, raised with wisdom, shaped by love, and ready to rule with the heart of her father and the fire of her mother. Thus, the legacy of Prince Darien lived on, not in monuments of marble, but in the laughter of healthy children, the songs of free folk, and the winds that now danced gently through the fields of Eldoria. Years passed in Eldoria, and under the reign of King Darien and Queen Liara, the realm flourished like never before. No one went hungry, no child was without schooling, and the arts blossomed in every corner of the kingdom. Eldoria had become not just a beacon of prosperity, but of justice and heart. Their daughter, Princess Elira, had grown into a sharp-minded and spirited young woman, trained in diplomacy by Liara and in empathy by her father. But while peace reigned at home, the world beyond Eldoria's borders was shifting. In the dark hills of Vareth, far to the west, a new power had risen, one not of brute force but of cunning, the Order of the Hollow Crown, a secretive council bent on influencing realms through fear, control, and the slow erosion of freedom. They believed generosity made kingdoms weak, and Eldoria, with its open hands and soft hearts, was their primary target. It began subtly, advisors whispering about tightening the treasury, outsourcing village health to private houses, taxing the Weavers' Guild. These were not Eldorian values, but they were wrapped in the language of strategy and protection. Darien, older now and trusting, began to rely more on his ministers. Liara, ever sharp-eyed, noticed the shift, and Elira, watching both parents, began to prepare herself. One night, Liara confronted a cloaked figure leaving the royal archives. What she found confirmed her fears. The Order of the Hollow Crown had infiltrated the court. "They want to hollow us from the inside," she told Darien. "They don't need to invade. They just need us to forget who we are." Darien looked at the halls of his palace, once filled with music, now shadowed by ambition and suspicion. His heart, so full in youth, ached with a truth he had hoped never to face. He summoned the council. In the grand council chamber, Darien stood before lords and ministers. His once dark hair now silver, but his voice still held the quiet power of a man who had always led with his heart. "We have forgotten," he said. "Not because we are weak, but because we grew comfortable. But comfort is not the same as peace." He cast aside the false proposals, exposed the Order's influence, and called for a return to the people's voice. But not all were pleased. A faction of the court broke away that night, fleeing into the west. The Hollow Crown had lost its grip on Eldoria, but not forever. Seeing the growing complexity of the world, Darien knew it was time to pass the torch. He and Liara called their daughter to the Sunstone balcony, the place where monarchs spoke to the people. "Elira," Darien said, taking her hand, "you were not born to wear a crown. You were raised to earn it. And you have," Liara added, "with your courage and your truth." In a ceremony open to all, Elira was crowned Queen of Eldoria. She swore to protect not just the land, but the soul of the kingdom, compassion. Darien and Liara stepped back, not into obscurity, but into service. Darien returned to walking the roads, speaking to villagers. Liara took on the role of advisor and guardian of the archives, preserving the stories of their people so history would never be rewritten by fear. The Hollow Crown, though driven back, still worked from the shadows. But they had underestimated the legacy of a generous prince and a bold weaver. They had underestimated the power of love, unity, and people who remembered who they were. Under Queen Elira's reign, Eldoria became a fortress of light, not just in walls or armies, but in spirit. The people stood together, for they knew their strength was not in gold or might, but in each other. And in the twilight years of their lives, Darien and Liara sat once more beneath the willow trees of Aloan, hands entwined, watching the wind play gently through the branches. "We did well, didn't we?" Liara whispered. Darien smiled, eyes twinkling like they had in youth. "We gave everything we could, and in return, we found everything that mattered."